Okay, it's Wednesday, and yes, we are back at CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. I'm here with, of course, Matt Schlapp, and we've had, although it's been a quieter week, I would say, in the news. What do you think, Schlapp?
I don't think there's such thing as a quiet news day or news week anymore.
Biden makes it so boring that, of course, you have to ask yourself.
Okay, so I have to say this, that I have had several members of the news media, if we can call them that. I know they're really the fake news media, but maybe some of the better folks in that genre have come to me and said, "Oh my gosh, it's so boring at the White House." First of all, the Capitol is on lockdown with the fence, and the White House is on lockdown because of who the president is, and it's just not the same. So
I feel like I'm on lockdown too sometimes. I'm going to be honest with you.
Well, and here we are. We're in a new studio here at the American Conservative Union. When these great guests come to the show, we're going to bring them here as much as possible.
And they can get a free mug. Yes, that's right. A free CPAC mug. So that's exciting.
Okay, so our guest today is someone we just have a tremendous amount of respect for a lot of reasons. The most important reason, I would say, is that he threw his hat in the ring to enter politics when he didn't need to. He'd been the CEO of 2 or 3 very successful companies. He's played at a very high level in the private economy, which Republicans think is actually more important than government. And then he looked at what was happening and said, I think I need to get in there and kick up some dirt, and he did. And that is Senator David Perdue from the great state, and the state we're all talking about, Georgia. Senator Perdue, thanks for being with us on CPAC Now.
Good morning, guys. Matt, Mercedes, and before we start, I just want to thank both of you for all you did last year here in Georgia. Every time I looked up, I saw one or both of you in a crowd or working or whatever. So people out there should know how hard you both worked last year here in Georgia and around the country, for that matter.
Well, and you're probably not going to say anything in response to this, but I tell people every time I do an interview or every time people ask, I always say, well, just remember, if Georgia had voted in 2020 as they did in 2016, David Perdue wouldn't have even had a runoff, and he would still be in the Senate. And this is the consequences of when they get the laws wrong.
Well, we had a perfect storm in Georgia. Johnny Isaacson retired. We had an appointment made there in that Senate seat, and that in Georgia law had to be run in a jungle general election in November without a primary. And so we had 2 senators running. We had a president running at the same time. It was a perfect storm. I remind all of our workers down here, we won in November, though. I mean, the Democrats only produced about well over 47.5% of the vote in November when everybody voted. That's the best poll, guys, that I've seen about where Georgia is right now. People say, well, Georgia's turned blue. Well, yeah, we have 2 liberal, radical senators in the United States Senate representing Georgia, but Georgia's still a red state. We just have this 50% rule like one other state, and any other state but one, I would be in the United States Senate right now, and we'd have the majority.
I got to tell you, when we were down in Georgia, we really got to see what was happening in terms of the names not matching up with the addresses, the fact that obviously these judges didn't want to get near these cases. And so let me ask you, what was your experience that November, December, January timeframe? What frustrations did you experience? Because at the campaign, I'm going to be honest with you, Georgia wasn't even considered a battleground state. It really wasn't.
Well, we tried to remind everybody back in May and June, particularly in the Senate, that Georgia had 2 senators running. That's a rarity in American politics, number one. Number two is that the Democrats had almost won the governor's seat in 2018. They had a ground game that couldn't be ignored, so we stood up to that. But my frustration was this, is that we produced the votes to win in November. And when we went to bed on Tuesday night, there was something around 1-1 or 1-2 absentee ballots that were official. By Friday, we had almost 1.5 million absentee ballots. I never subscribed to the theory that there was some kind of conspiracy with the machines, or it may have been. I don't know. I don't have that data. I don't have the evidence. But what I do know is this, is that Stacey Abrams and her Fair Fight Action Group worked for 2 years to get changes on the absentee ballots. Absentee ballots had a different standard. If you voted in person in Georgia in November, you had to have a voter ID. If you voted absentee, all you had to do was sign it. Now, here's the data point that I used that was so frustrating, and we could never get a special session of the Senate to really look into this particular issue. And that is this, that in DeKalb County, and there were 8 other counties, Democrat counties, all had the same data. Only 9 absentee ballots were rejected because of bad signatures out of 136,000 signatures. Now, that's a fact that the Secretary of State has already given us. In Fulton County, it was 38 out of 158,000 absentee ballots. So we went from 5% absentee ballots to 30% absentee ballots with this sort of thing on the signatures. Tells me that that's worth looking at. And when you're only about 10,000 votes away from a president winning in Georgia and me avoiding this runoff, that was enough to get my attention, but we couldn't get anybody to help.
Well, that's why I say if we had voted in 2020, like we did in 2016, what that means is, without talking about what software they're using for the elections and stuff, that gets to this question of, in America, in a democracy, anywhere where there's a major democracy around the globe, shouldn't you have to verify who you are in order to vote?
Well, it's interesting. 80% of Americans agree with that. 80%, according to a Gallup poll, 80% of Americans believe that you should have to show a voter ID, a personal ID to vote. 77% of the African American community in America believes that. And yet the Democrats are pandering to the black community, telling that any move to make elections more secure is somehow racist and voter suppression and so forth. It's a lie that we've lived with in Georgia now for the last 2 years. It's an ultimate lie that any improvement in voter rules is by definition racist and is voter suppression. Let me give you some examples. Georgia has 17 days now. This new law goes from 16 to 17 days and can go to 19 days with 2 extra Sundays if any county chooses to do that. New Jersey, for example, was praised last week by the president, Stacey Abrams, and others for extending their early voting for 9 days. 9 days in New Jersey. Delaware, the president's home state, does not even have early voting. So what the president needs to do is go to his home state and help them join the 21st century like he wants the rest of the country to do, and join early voting like we have here in Georgia. So what's going on in Georgia? I praise our state legislature for stepping in and doing the right things. I'm really disgusted, frankly, and very concerned about how some of our big corporations have caved in to this bullying and this blackmail based on a false narrative, because the facts are not there to support this voter suppression ideology.
You mind if I ask Senator real quickly about that? Because you have been the CEO of Reebok, of Philotex, of Dollar General. You've had a storied corporate career. All that time, you were a limited government conservative. You probably didn't make politics your most prominent aspect of what you did, but it's what you thought. Could someone like you actually be selected today to run a Fortune 50 company?
Well, that's a very interesting question. With the development of ISS and all these shareholder watch groups out there that put so much pressure on corporation boards and so forth to be socially correct, it's a real question. When I see what pressure these CEOs are under, I'm empathetic to it, but at the same time, I know that this runs both ways, and that your consumers out there are watching too. And so when a company says that, for example, they think that having a voter ID makes it harder for people in Georgia to vote, and yet to get on one of their airplanes, they have to have a photo ID, I think that's somewhat hypocritical. When President Biden says that this is a Jim Crow law, that's totally hypocritical based on what they're doing in Delaware and New Jersey and even New York. This water thing that hit all the news that, we're outlawing giving water out to people standing in line down here in Georgia. Well, that's just nonsense. What they did is they codified the rule that was already in place that said you can't politic within 150 feet of a polling place. Well, guess who else has that same law? The state of New York. The hypocrisy here just drips from every word the Democrats are saying.
But do you think that these CEOs of these corporations truly understand this voting legislation that was just passed in Georgia?
No, Mercy, that's a great question. I mean, that's a great point, and this is what I've been trying to combat. I was a sitting senator and ran in probably the most notorious Senate race in at least the last 100 years. I hate to say it that way, but that's really the fact, with the president running and all that happened in the runoff. I'm really empathetic. By the way, you guys know that over 800,000 people voted in November that did not vote in January. That was the biggest reason, if you poll them, was their lack of confidence that their vote would be counted correctly and that they weren't being cheated. So what the CEOs are not taking into account are the input from people like me. Nobody's called me. Nobody has asked any of our team. Nobody has said, well, what did you see? Nobody has seen the other side of the issue and certainly did not look at the facts.
What we're going to do at the American Conservative Union, Senator, is I don't know what to call you, Senator. I'm hoping one day we can call you Governor. I mean, we have a lot of titles we could talk about in the future, but there's even bigger titles than that. But the point is, what we're going to do here at the American Conservative Union is what we have done as a movement is attack all the politicians. We've attacked Republicans, and there's plenty of times when Republicans disappoint us, and we just saw more of that this week. But I think if the 73, 75 million Americans who voted for people like you and voted for Donald Trump and stuff, if we don't start expressing our voice to these companies, they're only hearing from the radicalized left. Right. They're not hearing from the other side of America. I think there's more of us than them because we're laissez-faire people. We say, hey, run your company as you want. If you want to be woke, I guess that's your choice. We have to stop doing that, and we have to start expressing our views, and we're going to start doing that this week. Is that the right thing for us to do?
100%. And it doesn't make you racist if you want to have it easier to vote and harder to cheat. What the Democrats are basically saying is racist in its own merit, and that is this. Yep. In Georgia, oh, well, blacks don't have voter ID. They don't have a photo ID. Well, that in itself is racist. And if they look at the data, 77% of African Americans in America believe that you should have some sort of ID in order to vote. And yet, H.R. 1, which has already passed the U.S. House of Representatives last year, has in there, embedded in that law, is the fact that you do not have to be a United States citizen to vote in a U.S. election. Now, I find that totally reprehensible and un-American.
What will be the impact of Major League Baseball leaving Atlanta and moving to what I call the white part of Denver?
Well, they better be very careful. At Reebok, we had all this bullying going on. We had people trying to blackmail us and so forth. And what they didn't pay attention to, we also had a human rights foundation. So we were doing a lot of good there, but they tried that and we withstood it. Major League Baseball better be very careful. As for all the, look, we love our Braves in Georgia, but people remember this. This is nonsense that they withdrew the All-Star game from Georgia based on lies. And that's what just happened. They didn't call me. They didn't call anybody else to get the other side of the story before they made this overwhelming decision. By the way, it's going to cost Georgians jobs. I have a U.S. senator right now that's calling for boycotts that will cost Georgians jobs based on this lie.
Yeah, when we had Roger Williams, who was in the Braves organization as a younger man, now a member of Congress from Texas, and he said one of the tragedies is they were going to honor Hank Aaron at the All-Star game, his hometown team, his hometown place. How disgusting and how out of sync is that?
Well, it's out of sync, but it's also, let's look at why. The Democrats have partnered with this ethos that says that, if you do anything to improve the efficacy of a voting situation in any state, you're somehow racist. Well, that's a lie. And so what we're trying to do now is get the facts out about that. But we've got to be very careful because 800,000 people of the 2.5 million votes I got in November, 850,000 people did not come back out and vote in January. They are disenfranchised. And this is what Major League Baseball is not paying attention to out there. The silent majority between the coast is paying attention to what big corporations and these leagues.
That's right.
And let me tell you something. They speak with their dollars. And you can't pay athletes the money that we pay them without the fan. And let me tell you where most of the fans are. They're not in New York and LA. Most of the fans are in blue collar America.
That's right. And it's an expensive ticket, and a cup of beer costs a lot of money. And you know what? They can do without. And I think a lot of people will if they're being offended like this.
That's true.
People from Georgia have been offended. This is an offensive move that they did without any real explanation based on what we know is not factual. Look, we're making it easy. We're extending from 16 to 17, could go to 19 days. We have 7 to 7 now, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is mandated. So Biden, everything Biden has said about this law has been adjudicated by the Washington Post with 4 Pinocchios. Everything he said has been wrong. And so we know what this law does. It makes it easier to vote for everybody. And look, this is why Republicans, just like Democrats, should want everybody to vote legally.
That's right.
Here's why I'm in this so deep. Is that in November of 2020, when everybody voted in Georgia, I won, Republicans won. And so we have no reason, there's no incentive to suppress votes in Georgia. We want everybody to vote. We just want the people who are not legal to not vote. We know that 5,000 people in the June 9th primary, according to our own Secretary of State and Attorney General, 5,000 people voted twice in Georgia. That's a fact. It's also a fact, to my knowledge, that nobody has been prosecuted for that. And we still don't know how many voted twice in November and in January. That's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem was the lack of control of these absentee ballots and the fact that a lot of people lost confidence in our voting system in Georgia, and a third of the Republican vote almost did not come back out and vote in January.
So not only do we have the Biden lies, the Biden misinformation, but now you've got the massive infrastructure plan that Biden is pushing forward. I think it's hidden in the Green New Deal mandates as part of his plan. What are your thoughts on this plan? What does this mean for American jobs?
Well, everything we told people during the election, and you guys were doing it too. I heard Matt on the speech one time say the same thing, and that is everything that we were telling people the Democrats were going to do, they are doing. They got rid of the Keystone Pipeline. They've made us dependent on the Middle East for oil again, got rid of our energy independence and so forth. And so this infrastructure bill, to me, looks more like a social engineering bill and an environmental bill. Only 15% of it really has anything to do with hardcore infrastructure. Go back and remember 2011, guys, when President Obama came up with, oh, yeah, I promised in 2008 we were going to have this massive infrastructure bill. Well, here it is. He spent $1 trillion. I dare you to go find any of those projects and look at the return on investment that America got from that boondoggle. We're about to do the same thing with the Green New Deal, which, by the way, cost American taxpayers $9 trillion each year. 9. You know how much the adjusted gross income of America is? About $9 trillion. This is how hypocritical, and these guys are so hypocritical, they have no idea what they're doing and what they're perpetrating, and they're doing it for one reason, and that is total power. What I'm afraid of is that they're going to use the infrastructure bill and H.R. 1 and this voting law in Georgia are excuses for Schumer to blow up that filibuster. If he does that and attacks the court, then grab hold of something, because we're headed for a real downdraft. And I'm really
we'll never get it back. We'll never get it back. If they slip on the filibuster and pass, they fundamentally undemocratize our elections. I just fear we'll never get America back.
And the biggest fear I have as well is that we'll be like Pete Buttigieg, all riding bicycles to work.
No, thank you. Although probably good for me. Hey, by the way, I know you love, it's a Georgia company and you love it, but I'm not drinking any more Coke. And you know what? I think I'm going to be healthier for it. So you don't have to say a word because they're your constituent company, but I'm done with them.
Yeah, well, the boycotts only hurt one person. That's the worker. That's what boycotts do.
That's a very fair point.
They don't make any difference, and that's why this is so hypocritical for the Democrats to really destroy Georgia jobs over what is not really the truth.
Well, yeah, Senator, I would recommend not retweeting Matt's tweet on Coca-Cola. It's gotten about 13,000 likes. Just letting you know.
I think for conservatives, in the end, there don't tend to be boycotters. But I do think they want to hold these CEOs accountable, and I think we have to have our voice directed at them. And I think for some of these CEOs who actually aren't that political, they need the firepower from the right so they can go to their boards and say, yes, I know we've heard from all these whack jobs on the socialist left, but, you know, we've woken up, like you said, the in between the coast America, and we're hearing from them too, so maybe we ought to stay out of this issue. I think neutrality would be victory.
Well, look at every presidential race for the last 60 years, 100 years. It's about 50-50. I mean, it really is. What they're doing is listening to the 5% radical movement of the Democratic Party that seems to be in control, or 10% or whatever, and they're driving policy based on those guys. They're very liberal. They don't represent. Look at this. 77% of African Americans in America believe in voter ID. I mean, these are common sense Americans first. And I'm in a state that has, for the last 60 years, fought for equality and so forth. So for the Democrats to pander to that community, trying to make this a racial issue, is absolutely insulting to most of us here in Georgia.
Well, Senator, we've always appreciated your honesty, the fight that you give every single day for the people of Georgia, for all Americans. We greatly appreciate the great work you've done. I know that your political career is far from over. So we want to make sure you stay in the action and get back in there because we need you and the people of Georgia need you. So we want to thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. Don't tell my wife that, Mercy, okay?
I'm calling. She's on speed dial.
Bonnie.
I'm calling right now.
You guys, thank you.
Welcome back to CPAC Now. What a great conversation we just had with, unfortunately, former Senator David Perdue of Georgia. And I think he was a real truth teller on what the heck is going on.
Well, you could tell he's ready to stay in the fight, which I think says a lot. And he recognizes that there needs to be fundamental changes in Georgia. And we've got to stop these corporations. Like, what is going on with them where they want to dictate these political
We talked about it
provisions.
when we started this show. We started the show because of the terrible coverage from everything on television when it came to the coronavirus, or whatever you like to call it. And then that morphed into those terrible riots across our country. And we watched corporate America sending these checks to Black Lives Matter Incorporated and these other radicalized groups. And this disgusting thing has flowered into this stinky blossom of anti-Americanism.
So it's really interesting. I was talking to a mutual friend of ours who said, well, maybe it's those that are under the age of 30 that they like to see these corporations be political advocates as well. And it's the kind of the older generation that's saying, you know, stay out of my politics. I thought that was an interesting analysis. What do you think about that?
I love the idea that we're going to have people under 30 years old make all the decisions in this country. That sounds freaking brilliant. That's what got us into this problem. We elected a very young president by the name of Barack Obama, who was, as Pat Roberts used to like to say, a rookie president. And he did more to really disable the strength of this country.
But Schlapp, Biden, he's not a under 30 president. Are you kidding me?
Well, you know, there's a lot of ways to gauge somebody's abilities. And with Joe Biden, that's a very interesting conversation to figure out how to gauge where he is on the meter. But no, it's true. We have now gone to somebody who's really an old president, and I think a lot of people view him as the figurehead for the Obama team. They have completely staffed out his administration. He said yesterday through a spokesperson that he talks to Obama on a regular basis. I mean, I see Barack Obama and Michelle Obama making a lot of decisions in this administration.
No kidding. And he also got very close to an individual and said, social distance. I mean, he's just clueless. I'm sorry. But this is what America voted for. And, you know, we're going to keep talking about what this administration is doing. But I want to bring up a tweet because, you know, your tweets really, truly, Schlapp, they're unique. Okay. I thought
they get me in a lot of trouble.
Sometimes they do. But this one
I
is
apologize
classic.
ahead of time.
And I'll tell you why it's classic, because here's a little secret about Matt Schlapp. Okay. He loves Diet Coke. He'll hide a Diet Coke in, like, you know, in his closet. I mean, you can find Diet Coke lying around in our house all the time.
She hates it, so.
Well, and it's because I'm more of like the, you know, organic, natural, good eater type of thing.
I thought Diet Coke is organic.
The kids, remember the kids, this was a great story. So the kids were little, and the kids hadn't really had a donut ever, really.
Mercy literally did not allow sugar in the house.
For the first 2 or 3 kids.
She had a book on the shelf. It was called Cereal Killer, because she thought that eating cereal would kill you.
But serial killer, like Cereal, okay? But the kids, then all of a sudden the neighbors come over with the donuts, and the girls just grab the donuts. They're hiding. All of a sudden, we can't find them.
Donuts.
And what did Viana tell you?
No, so what happened is that our neighbor came over with Krispy Kreme donuts, and our girls did not know what they were. Donuts. They did not know what they were. And one of our children grabbed the donut and ran to the garage because she knew it was Alyssa. She knew that what she was about to eat was naughty. And our oldest, Viana, got the donut. And later on, she said, "Dad, that was the best bagel I've ever had." Those are our children.
Yeah.
We've come a long way since those days.
With kid number 5, forget about it. There's M&Ms and all sorts of goodies in our house, especially right after Easter. But this tweet was classic. It said, there was new Coke, then classic Coke, now woke Coke, we are no Coke.
We're no Coke. And I think that's better for me. And look, I think Senator Perdue brought up the fact that we're not really a boycotting movement, but I don't know. I'm not going to drink Coke. You call it what you want. I'm done with them. And people are emailing me saying Pepsi gave a bunch of money to Black Lives Matter. So guess what? I'm fine with be done with them too. I actually don't want to spend my money on companies that freaking hate me and that don't like the country and that are ripping us apart and that are telling us there's something racist about having an ID to vote.
But Schlapp, don't you think that it's corporate America, they're just getting so much pressure from the left that they're just caving in?
Well, two things are at stake, which is most of these companies orbit in the Washington, D.C., New York City, Davos kind of environment. So they're not talking to regular America in red states. Number two, I think you make a fair point, and David PERDUE made the point too, which is if all they do is hear from the left, guess what, folks? They're going to eventually listen to them. They're going to always go to where the pressure is. So what we're going to do at the American Conservative Union is we're going to add to those voices on the right who are saying, no, we don't want to rip apart or blow up Mount Rushmore. No, we don't want to say it's fine to cross the border illegally and then vote. And vote more than once, which is exactly what would happen if we don't change these voting rules.
And we're going to be coming to you all as a call to action, letting you know this is, we're going to need you to also be part of this fight in connecting with these companies and saying, no more, we're not going to put up with this. There's another tweet, which, David, you're actually so tall that you're covering the tweet. Read this now. And John Feary, I'm not drinking Coke. It's easy to do and really crappy for me anyways. It's time for ACU Conservative, at ACU Conservative, to hold these CEOs accountable. Get ready.
That's a tweet from me, but John Feary wrote a great piece for The Hill, which I encourage you to go to. I also write for The Hill a lot now, and it's a great place to go get news on both the left and the right. But John's piece is great. You should read it.
Okay, great. Well, we'll send it out to you all, too, so you can take a look at it. But I want to shift gears here.
Yeah.
So what we're witnessing at the border is so tragic.
Yeah, it's terrible.
I want to
And preventable.
Very preventable. And this is due to Biden's weak border security policies. And at the end of the day, it's these children who are the victims. And I'd like to play this clip for you all.
¿Ah? ¿Qué pasó? Es que yo venía con un grupo de personas y me dejaron botar y no sé dónde están. No sé dónde están. ¿Te dejaron solo? Pues claro, me dejaron botado. ¿Te dejaron solo botado? Solo. ¿No vienes con mami o con papi o con nadie? ¿Ah? ¿Vienes con tu mamá o tu papá? Nadie. Yo venía en un grupo que venía de entrega con usted y al final me dejaron botado y venía aquí a pedir auxilio. ¿Te dejaron botado y te dijeron que vinieras a pedir auxilio? No, yo vengo.
That child is the age of our youngest. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, you should be ashamed of yourself. What you're putting these children through, what you're putting these families through, because your message of the don't come in, it's not working. These kids are suffering, these families are suffering, and it's got to stop.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is whenever you have a policy that is put out there to try to make it look like you're being tolerant, to make it look like you're playing up to some base of your voters, you have to actually go to the communities and go to the border and talk to the people. And when we send the message that you can come to America and that our border won't be enforced, guess what people do? They come here. And what happens with these kids is they're used by the cartels and other groups to try to enter into this country and to bring contraband into this country. And look at the kids. It's a devastating humanitarian crisis. Now, the Biden administration did seem to indicate that they actually are going to build some portions of the wall. Now, if that actually happens, that is like the biggest flip-flop in the history of politics. We were told by everybody on the left that if you build a wall, if you actually secure that border, if you keep people in Mexico, if you get rid of catch and release, you're a racist. Well, now they're realizing that if we actually don't police our border, we're going to have so many people coming and rushing the southern border that there's no way to even process them.
Yeah, they're calculating about 1 million by the end of the year. And the Border Patrol agents are at their wits' end. I mean, they're the ones that are not only caring for these children, but also trying to keep order at the border, and without any real support coming, and silence, think about it, silence coming from the Biden administration. But then you've got the border czar, the person who's supposed to be in charge of the border, Kamala Harris. But I'd like to take you back to comments that she made when she made her presidential campaign announcement in 2019. Let's play that clip.
When we have children in cages crying for their mothers and fathers, don't you dare call that border security. That's a human rights abuse.
But let me tell you, human rights abuse, you're causing this human rights abuse, Kamala Harris. You are causing this human rights abuse, Joe Biden. You have done nothing. And let me tell you, it was because we saw President Trump put strict border security restrictions, policies in place that worked to stop the flow of illegal immigrants coming to this country. And I got to tell you, Matt, it's like if we don't speak up and really, really put pressure on this administration, this is going to end up not only being a humanitarian crisis, but a national security crisis.
Look, we're already there. They already know that there were some terrorists that went over the border. That's, you know, all on social media today. But I think this idea that they would actually flip on the wall, this is one of the most amazing political stories I think I've ever seen. Now, we'll see what they do. Of course, the money is there. They need to spend it on the wall. That's what the law says they must do. The Biden administration has said, no, they're not going to use that money. This is all being adjudicated by the courts, unfortunately, and it shouldn't be. They should just use that money. But the problem with the border is it took President Trump years. It's a complicated thing. It took them years to negotiate with these countries, including in the Northern Triangle and Mexico, and to work with border agents who they do not call Nazis. They call, you know, love the blue, right? Back the blue. It took a long time to fix this, and within a very short period of time, the Biden administration has broken the border. And even if they start to take corrective measures, Mercy, as you know, we're in the thick of a problem. It's going to take a long time to get back.
These are Biden, Kamala Harris cages. These are Biden, Kamala Harris crisis, and it's going to take a real change in our political majorities to help stop this problem.
Stop making political gains over race in this country because you're splitting us up. Stop using your amnesty and open borders as a way to call Republicans racist because you're hurting a lot of kids, including that young man who I think breaks all of us our heart when we see how he's being used by these cartels.
Well, we want to thank you all for joining us. We can't do this without you. You're part of our family. We love to share what we're seeing out in the news, bring you the best newsmakers across the country to join CPAC now, America UnCanceled.
Nobody's getting better guests than us. Would you agree?
I love it. I love it. It's great. And they love coming on, and we really have a great discussion. And we always want to hear about your input, so make sure to follow us on social media. Go to @CPAC. I'm over at Mercedes Schlapp and at @MSchlapp to follow us and know what's happening so we can keep you connected to what's happening not only here in the DC area, the swamp, but across the country and across the globe. Thank you so much.
God bless.